thank you, Frank, and thank you for a great term. Um, I'm sure you don't need to be reminded that we'll all be back by what, the end of March?
March 25th, I think.
That sounds good to me. So, yeah. So, Ollie is alive and well and going on and on and on. That's to say that while we are ending this particular term, it's a continuing course because I just can't do the Middle Ages in one term. I mean, it's kind of a long time, 1,000 years or so. So it just goes on and on. So next term, we'll have what's called the late Middle Ages as opposed to the high Middle Ages. And it's late only in terms of late for them. Some would prefer to call it the Renaissance or Reformation, but I'd rather keep it as part of mine, and we just go on and on in terms of the period. But today's topic is, as you can see, Sicily, and you can say, but there's so much to say about Sicily. I mean, if you want to go back into classical times, I was standing there the other day and began to think about Thucydides and, Sicily and the campaign of the Sparta and Athens, and all of the times that Sicily has been involved, more or less inadvertently, thanks to all of those around it. Clearly, Sicily is very important, and we know that the Mediterranean is part of that reason. And Sicily's had quite a role. I would call it quite international. When you think about all the folks who've been there and occupied it, we think of it, of course, because of World War II, but its long-running history even takes us as far as a Verdi opera. You wouldn't think I'd bring up the history of music, would you? But yes. And it's called the Sicilian Vespers. So if you ever want to do trivia night and bring up this subject, people will be stunned, amazed about your incredible Sicilian knowledge, because that is not one of Verdi's greatest hits, but it actually exists. So in case you're ever interested in the history of opera, you can check it out. The Sicilian Vespers will have a great significance, but I chose it as my swan song of the winter because virtually every power in the High Middle Ages will get involved in Sicily. And this will create, as you can imagine, a massive conflict amongst them. And it's like sort of bringing everybody back and sort of the way we were and, that sort of thing. And I thought that was a nice way to end the term, that we could remember all these various rulers and say, wow, and they were interested in Sicily too. Yes, indeed. Who wouldn't be, right? I mean, obviously. So that's where we're going. And of course, here it is. Tourists. Yes. If you didn't want to go before now, you could think of, Palermo. Yeah, get your reservation. Syracuse down there. I was just thinking about that because of the That's where the famous campaign, the Sicilian campaign, went on when the Athenians, another story, another class. But yes, all of that is very significant. And again, Salerno, Naples, on up. So, yeah, there's quite a bit to be concerned about. Now, the date here is the 12th century. So you realize, of course, there are going to be changes, lots of changes, but it won't be Italy for a long time. Think about the period of the American Civil War. If you think about that's how long it'll be before all of that is unified against the will of many with the North. And there is always, I would say, probably some ill feeling between North and Southern Italians, even though, of course, you wouldn't see it at the Olympics, I guess, but you understand, of course, that there is great resentment. But this area will be unified in the mid 12th century. To go, and of course, let's never forget our papal states. Yes, Pepin would be so hurt if you did. And I won't have that because he provided that for St. Peter. So here are some points. This is sort of hitting the high points only because, first of all, we know that by the time with which we're concerned, Sicily was occupied by a variety of people. And that probably would have to do with its, as we would say today, I guess, diverse population. There were Muslims there, folks who were Arabs, and of course, Greeks. I mean, Greek is spoken here because, remember our Byzantines, they love to hang out in Sicily. So, I mean, you say, well, who wouldn't? But yeah, that's true. We always think about all of this is so Italian, but let's remember all these other people are there too. So, all of this, of course, and with a very big reputation for a stop off place for those crusaders and people who might be hanging out with crusaders. It's a nice place to go before on to the Holy Land. So all of that is to say that it has this great population, but there is no order. There are a lot of different rulers, as it were, but it is more or less chaotic until we get to the 11th century. And you were thinking, oh, 1000s. You mean I do? Like some kissing cousins of William the Conqueror. Yes, it's those Normans. Yeah. They are out and about and they are ready for opportunities when they can get them. And it appears that some Normans came down into what we call southern Italy and Sicily, and then they got back in touch with the folks back home and sort of like the Danes or other people. Y'all come, the weather's great, food's good. And so apparently more and more Normans came. Now remember, this is 11th century, and established themselves in authority over this area. At first, they made the Pope nervous. The popes by that point, or really I should say the Normans by this point, they had converted, but they could still be a little rough, a little rough around the edges. they might have missed mass sometimes or not forgotten to go to a baptism. But whatever the case, it's very interesting that the Normans and the popes of that day, and some of you will remember Leo the Ninth, the Saint Leo the Ninth, actually. And then, of course, no one would forget Gregory VII, 1073 to 1085. Thank you for that, Donna. You're really you're going to get an A if you keep up your oral contribution. So all of this is to say that they make a bond, and not just based on the faith, based on political reality. The Pope basically says to the Norman Duke, named Roger by this time, how would you like to be my vassal? And Roger said, oh, sir, that would be so great. Yeah, I know. Oh, I can't wait. Let's go to mass, right? So basically then he will become a papal vassal and he'll be called a duke. And so he's kind of stepping out, with a bunch of Norsemen, and they're all going, wow, so you're a vassal, huh? Yeah, everybody's jealous. So it's very interesting because we remember what happened to Gregory VII because of that nasty Henry IV canonization. Yeah, you remember that. Say yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'd rather you live a lie than tell the truth. Yeah. In the case, this what happened was, of course, that Henry IV was able to take over Rome, and Gregory VII was in a serious bind because if you're a pope who's having unpleasantries with a lay leader, you don't want to get together in a locked room. So the idea was the Normans will come to Rome. Isn't that nice? And rescue him. I mean, he didn't really, he hated, it's embarrassing, but because it's my city. Not me, but it's the Pope's city. And it's rather annoying because, as some of you will recall, the Pope brought his own Pope, a son of Satan, I know, but he pretended like he was Pope so he could crown him. Well, I won't get into all that, but that's how the Normans are. They evacuated him, the Pope, and then he went down crying his heart out down south. Not that you wouldn't be pleased. As great as Rome is, who wouldn't want to be in Salerno? Yeah. So anyway, that relationship is very important to remember. It's like, I'll remember this. I appreciate you because those Germans are just no good. So bear that in mind as we move on. Now the story goes on, of course, and who can forget him? Frederick Barbarossa. Yes. Barbarossa, like most Germans, always want to go south. You say, but that doesn't belong to you, so that's a no-no. You shouldn't go into other people's territories. That doesn't seem to have stopped anybody so far. And it definitely did not stop these Hohenstaufens. So he got the idea of marrying his son and heir, Henry, to a Norman heiress. And I guess you'd say it seemed like a good idea at the time. What does Constance, as her name was, bring to the marriage? Well, as we'll see next term, it was rumored she had been pulled out of a convent because at one time they thought, she wasn't going to be able to get married, a good marriage. So how about being an abbess? And apparently she appreciated the life, but then they said, we're going to have to pull you out. She said, but these classes were so great. I hate to, it's like you got all these academic opportunities. Now you got to be a wife and a mother. So it was very, very different. But the prospect, I should say, of Constance ever inheriting anything major was highly dubious. There were several males ahead of him. That is, the children of the current Norman Duke. And of course, now we're in the 12th century. So, all of this is to say, she and Henry married, and they both died young, but not before breeding. And to make the story even more interesting, before I get into the product of their breeding, you need to note that he was Henry VI, and Constance survived all of her brothers. Isn't that wild? So you know what that means, husband. Yeah, baby, good for us. What do you mean us, man? Yeah, that's the way it goes, though. Yeah. So that's Henry for him. But he didn't live long, and Constance lived 2 years after him. We are getting towards the end of the 12th century, and you go, you're getting me excited because you're making me think about the papal action figure, Innocent III, 1198 to 1216. Yes, I am, oh bright one. Yes, I am. Constance, before her death, will be in touch with Innocent and say, of course, we are vassals, so my health is not good. I need for you to promise you'll take care of our child. And Innocent saying, of course I will. And so she does. And Frederick, now a little boy, and this is Frederick II, son of Henry VI. Now, don't worry, I've got a tree coming up because I know there's nothing like a tree. Oh, look at that. I know, it's very titillating, very exciting. Who would not want a Hohenstaufen genealogical? For every home, you can get this and you go like, wow. And then look at these. Could you ask? Oh, legitimate, illegitimate, we have it all. If it's from any of this crap. Basically, what I want you to see, and I'll go back, is how we come along. Frederick II, and we all understand they're so cute when they're little, but then they grow up. And that's our Frederick II, who is now in hell, according to the Divine Comedy, know the story. And Frederick II, as we will see, has two sets of children, one legitimate, one illegitimate. I just show you that, see Conrad, and then I love Conrad's son's name, Conradina. It's so cute. little Conrad. You see running around with Tinker Toys on the strike or Polaroid moment, coming up. But anyway, more of that in a moment. I just thought I would show you. And understanding these are half German and then half, I could say Sicilian, but they're Norman Sicilians, right? And so they've got a background. Maybe it makes it very confusing because they're Germans too. So Frederick II evidently has a claim to being German emperor, and he will eventually get that. And I mean, that's like, future emperor of Europe. And you're thinking like, wow, I love Sicily. It's great to hang out in Palermo, and he's got incredible teachers, people who are teaching him Greek and probably studying the Quran or, something about Muhammad. I mean, all of this is it's not like being up in Paris or Bologna or something like that. I mean, this is for the future Sicilian king. And remember, this is going on despite his guardian. And I hardly think that little Frederick II is running around the papal palace talking to his Uncle Innocent. But I'm thinking the Pope was more or less the legal guardian. But as far as we know, he had a variety of Muslim and Byzantine teachers and all of that. And then eventually, I guess by the time he was a teenager, they were saying, now, sir, you probably need to go north and check up on your Hohenstaufen lines. And, oh, do I have to? Because, I mean, he's all about the South. That's a very interesting, I guess, more or less likes the title, but not so much the place. In any event, just thought I'd show you that. But how does the Pope feel? Well, as long as innocence love, remember 1198 to 1216. And you remember Fourth Lateran Council 1215. Not that I'm asking, you don't have to memorize dates for the final. So you're safe on that score. But if you know that, you'll get extra credit. So seriously, it's like innocent tends to be, oh, now, Freddie, remember, you're going to have to give up one or the other. Oh, I want it all. You know how children can be. And I want the empire. I want Sicily. Why can't I have it? Why can't I have it? The nag. Yes, I've heard about that. And Innocent says, well, we'll see, stall them. And then Innocent died. And you know how, say, the word of a living pope is worth 20 of the dead ones. So the popes after Innocent III don't tend to be as like, I love you, little Freddie. And he gets to be a big boy, and he gets a little snarly and probably like many teenagers. I know, not yours, but this may have been going on. And it was very interesting that they say, these popes are saying, now listen, you take one, and now you have a child of your own, and that child can have the other. But you can't have both, because that would make your Holy Father very nervous. The idea of being sort of caught between one would make any ruler nervous, particularly, or even though he is head of the church. Ultimately, the Pope will excommunicate him. And Frederick has become not a Muslim, and he doesn't become an Eastern Orthodox. But you say, is there a third choice? How about, get ready, free thinker? Oh, yeah. You say, oh, no, a Voltaire in the 13th century. Well, he just has all sorts of interesting ideas. That's the best way to put it. Interesting. But the main thing we ought to know is that he goes on a crusade, meets the Sultan in Jerusalem. They talk it over. Do you mind if the pilgrims come in and visit? And they're really interested. And he's under excommunication. And he is re-excommunicated when he gets back. I mean, it's like double excommunicated. Damn you, damn you, damn you. Yeah, that's just not good. So basically, if you thought you were going to hell, it's double you're going to hell. And as far as I'm aware, Frederick II never really was concerned about it. He did go on crusade, but you're not supposed to be negotiating with them. You're supposed to kill them. So you miss the whole purpose of going on the crusade. You have an agreement. Yeah, you are really going to hell. So he survived until 1250. And by that point, it's hard for me to believe that they could have kissed and made up, because he went to a church council, or it was meeting in a city, and his army surrounded the church council. And I mean, that's so scary. And he issued a proclamation saying, I think churchmen should go back and live the way that Jesus and his apostles did. And you know what that means. No bonds, no stocks. Yeah, no portfolios for you. You're going to live in some apostolic poverty, and we're going to help you. Yeah, and that's not what people want to hear. I didn't sign up for the Franciscan order, I'm telling you. So, yeah, he had problems. He died in 1250. He was succeeded by his son, who had also been excommunicated, like father, like son. But again, it was that issue of nobody was willing to sign over either position of being the German emperor, Holy Roman, or Sicilian king. And the result is that Conrad IV, which was a typical German imperial name, died in the state of excommunication. So on we go. And we are now in the mid-3rd century. You're thinking, but what about the Sicilian Vespers? I'm getting there. But I just want to make sure everybody got this straight, because if you need to repeat this during your orals, yeah, you want to get it straight. So I know it can be very confusing. Now, there comes a real fair-haired boy. Unfortunately, born on the wrong side of the bed, but this happens. And Manfred was his name. And what makes him so interesting to me, of course, is, but you don't look Sicilian. Well, I don't think so. I mean, he was Nordic all the way. So obviously, This was Frederick II's son by some Nordic person. And, it's like when you're illegitimate, you sort of have to wait for your chance. I mean, it's like your dad appreciates you and all, but, I've got Conrad here and he's going to do everything and you'll be provided for, but all of that. Well, can I help? Yes, you can, Manny, little Manny. Manfred. So that will be this. Well, apparently, according to the tales, he was very good looking in a Germanic way. And he had been, in many ways, the sort of protector of Conrad's interests. And when Conrad died, Manfred then made himself king of Sicily. You say, well, how can you do that? Well, of course you can do it well because Conrad's son was just a child. So Uncle Manfred's going to become a king because you're going to be emperor someday. Yes, sir. So here we have the coronation of Manfred, and I'm wondering, I guess you take a deep breath and hope nobody will oppose me. I thought that's an interesting illustration to see the clergy on one side. And you understand, of course, that not everybody is in favor of Manfred. He had lots of enemies. And I dare say one of them was the Pope. Because the papacy can hardly support Manfred. But we can always find clergy when we need it. Whatever side we're on. They're called sycophants. They work with us for a small cost. Or large, depending. But that's Manfred, and he becomes very important, fascinating individual, actually, that he rose and became very, very significant. Now, meanwhile, Conrad's son, he was getting to be a big boy, teenager. So he took up the claim. And you can see, according to the illustration, it didn't end well. I think we could call it capital punishment. He was 16 years old. And of course, there were all kinds of pleas for clemency. But the Pope refused to intervene. The idea being that Conradine is sort of like the end of the line. Manfred's only child was female. So, Conradine, the son of Conrad, so he's the grandson of Frederick II. Right? Now he's executed. And the idea is these awful people are all gone now. And so now someone who is approved by the church will become ruler. So I just think that illustration, you say, oh, but behind him are all these religious people. No, not necessarily. They're all getting ready for their executions. He gets to go first because I know, because you got position and status. So yeah, it's like, well, thank you, Dankeschön, whatever you would say. I thought that was interesting though, and you're, of course, look at your hair, you got your last haircut, and y'all done up, and you look like little monks. So that's like, oh, Satan won't confuse you and think they, when he coming down for soul collection, SOUL collection. he can't say, oh, that's one of mine. Because he'll say, oh, he looks like a Franciscan. Yeah, so I know that outfit. You dress them up. So anyway, that's the story. So, where do we go? Yes. The English will call this the Sicilian business. Now, we have seen governments throw away a lot of money on wrong-sided ambitions. But this is one of England's greatest hits, if you want to call them hits. The idea being, during the reign of Henry III, 1216 to 1272, you don't have to know that. Henry III, King of England, was a very devoted father, as many are. So he was thinking his second son would enjoy being a king. What the popes will do through their envoys is have an audience with the king and say, that's a fine looking lad, your younger boy. In other words, this is Edward I, the future Edward I's younger brother. So he said, he's a nice looking fellow. Gosh, I wish he could be a king. Bait. Yeah. When they offer you something, you have to, what do you want? You're after something, but you're not going to question a cardinal. Well, maybe. So they saying then, this is like turning them on. You can just imagine Henry III's going like, well, thank you, Your Holiness. I appreciate this. You suppose there could be a kingdom for him too? For my youngest? Yes, my son. We could arrange something. Oh, thank you, sir. See. Oh, whatever he would say. The idea is, darn it, there's a little cost. Yeah. That hurts, doesn't it? I mean, you thought this was just going to be a gift. We wish it could be free, but many of the great, yes, we need a love offering. A rather significant love offering. Yeah. So all this is going to mean, if we want to offer the kingship of Sicily for the English prince, it'll cost you. War is expensive. I've heard that. You know more than I would. But they're very expensive, and it was no different back then. And all of this, they would be put on the English. Because our money is going for missions and, hospitals and cafeterias, whatnot. So all of these expenses must come from the English. And you say, so there's a problem, big problem, because the English can never come up with the money. It's like lots of big talk, but never enough. Oh, you beg and plead from the monasteries and everybody, and give until it hurts. God, don't we see that all the time? Folks saying now, give and donations. It's a major business. So can you imagine the pressure on Henry III? And the threat with excommunication. Yes, this man Bill wasn't happy, but he was constantly, you got behind. Oh, what is the credit card bill? We haven't received your last payment. You probably didn't see it. I'm just imagining what they were putting the pressure on him. you got behind on your payments, and so you send a letter, dear Holy Father, I love you so very much. The check's going to be in the mail. It's coming real soon. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine how that would have been, but I think they were really tired of putting up with it. And so finally, no refunds. All sales are final. You made all these promises, but finally they just say, we always love you so much. St. Peter will always think you're very special. Unfortunately, we can't offer you Sicily anymore. We said, well, I want a refund. No refund. Oh, this is Amazon. No Amazon, baby. You've lost it.
Free will donation.
Go ahead, Charles.
Hi, I just had a question. Your first bullet point, you said that Edmund could never raise enough financial resources for the military force necessary to prevail in Sicily.
Right.
Prevail against whom?
Against any enemies, and that would include all of those forces connected to the anti-papal elements in Sicily.
Oh, there were anti-papal elements?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Because remember, it's very much a case of, but that's a very good question. I mean, it's still a very...
I thought the Pope called the shots,
I know it would be neat if that would all just work out, but they're still fighting. And the popes were trying to call all the shots. Believe me, it's not like they're saying, oh, shucks, let's just share. I don't want anybody to get hurt. Kiss, kiss. No. But that's a good question. So, who do we turn to after all that money? Talk about throwing away a lot of funding. We turn naturally to the French. Love the French. And you can just imagine that Henry III, I mean, that hurts. But they don't hide it, like, we wish it had worked out and we love you very much. And we just can't wait to hang out with you in London or whatever. But instead, St. Louis says, and this is Louis IX, I've got this kid brother, and I love you so much, speaking to the Pope. And we really could work this all out. So I'm the older brother, and I just want to do what's best for you and the Holy Father and my little brother. So that's how Charles of Anjou will then become king. And look at what they describe him, Charles of Anjou. Dour. I'm glad no Ollie people are dour. I'm so glad you're not dour. I want you to be dour because that'd be awful, having a dour crowd with Ollie class. No dour here. But yeah, so dour, cruel, and ambitious. I mean, he's not going out for most popular, right? He's not like the ratemyruler.com. So Charles of Anjou, and yet he's the kid brother to St. Louis. I don't know. Genetics. It's just a strange business, isn't it? But he becomes the Sicilian king because he is St. Louis' brother, and St. Louis is able to provide what they all call now funding. I always love that. Funding, yes. Because believe me, it doesn't pay for itself. You want to have a war, then you better pull out some francs or euros, as we call it now. And that means for the French takeover. But it does come about. And he then becomes King Charles I, as we see from the crowning. Clement IV was actually, you should say, culturally French, came from a French background. So it seemed interesting to have him. You might say they were in collusion, but it sounds rather sinister, doesn't it? But the idea being that Clement had once been a minister of the French government, and now he's the Pope, and then Charles Montague is now crowned King Charles I. Now you say, if I were king, I would not want to be dour. No, you wouldn't. You would want to be happy, and I know, and say, I love Sicily. Heart, yeah, go Sicily, go Big S, yeah. They all think, and I think essentially he's not effective. He brings all of his French cronies. And then what do? You guess it. Suck that money out of them, those poor Sicilians, and they think, could we have a recall? Could we have an anti-dour campaign, and so that we bring Charles Montague down? So it will be very, very hard, especially when he moves the capital from Palermo to Naples. Yeah. You talk about some hard feelings. Think about your Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. And you're thinking, like, what? Naples? What's wrong with Palermo? We've got some great facilities here and all of that. That is just, but apparently, I would think your health would be better insured up there in Naples than it would be in Palermo in terms of being French. Because there's a lot of feeling, apparently, of a class of French ruling over the Sicilians, and the feeling isn't good. And that, of course, brings us finally, I know, it takes a long time to get to this Vespers. But you can see why it will be operatic. You can see that scene there in that artistic representation of, there is, of course, the oppressed woman who will, of course, no peasants there. She will be a lady of high rank and a Sicilian. And according to the tale, she was then, quote unquote, insulted. I think we would use stronger language nowadays. Harassed, broke, yeah, whatever. You think of all the awful things that we read about now. And her husband was there, and he is, of course, as they say, bent out of shape. Isn't that the expression they use? So there you go. We've got our riot, and they're just getting out of church. So if you wonder about where does the Vespers come from, that's it. And you see it's around Easter. So you think, what happens now? Well, as you see from the last bullet point, they start finding anybody bring up anything French. Yeah, you're going down, dour one. Okay, because we don't like you, and you say, but all because of this. Well, most people think that this war, the Sicilian Vespers, is much to do with power and control. And of course, you're thinking, maybe we miss Manfred. Some people saying, gosh, we wish he were still here. And you know, when I say that, I'm leading up to something. Oh, but this is a more realistic. But again, yeah, I know. Graham, but not like some of those shows I've watched on television. Yeah, because so. But I'd be, if I were French, I would start taking some Italian classes or taking some English. I know nothing. Je ne sais pas. The idea being that the French, this whole violence against the French is going on. So now, if we don't like the French and King Charles, as he is called, is up in Naples, and we think, gosh, Palermo, you've been hurt. Maybe if we get hurt, maybe we need a new king. And now we're going to get one. Where will we find one? Aragon. Yes. We love Aragon. I mean, many of you have been there, Spain, and you're thinking, gosh, why do we need to go to Iberia? Oh, another tree opportunity. Because Manfred, remember Manfred? Yes. Don't forget him. His daughter would marry the king of Aragon. Yeah. There's old Peter right there. Pedro, excuse me. So Pedro's saying, like, I'm so hurt on behalf of my dear wife and my dear late father-in-law. Yeah, right. Those French, they're such losers. I hope they'll all go to hell. But on their way to hell, I would like to make their trip to hell as uncomfortable as possible. And besides, I believe my father-in-law would like this. I loved him so. I'm thinking, I'm not sure that it was quite that ridiculous, but it was pretty much, because Peter was very ambitious, and later in the same year of 1282, he would invade Sicily on this anti-French campaign. Down with Charles I, Carlos. Down with him. And up with Pedro. A new day for Sicily, that kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. It's very interesting how long this went on, this Peter of Aragon. The struggle went on for decades. And this, of course, Charles of Anjou, first Sicilian king of French extraction, who in fact would be connected with this French element, will now have to compete with this Aragonese. And you say, well, how did the Sicilians come out of this? Well, I guess some went one way and some went another. But in the event, if you think about the map, it looks like the French, who were supporting King Charles I, obviously, were up in Italy proper, whereas Peter of Aragon was getting those people actually in Sicily. The struggle went on till the beginning of the 14th century. But here is what you'll come out with. You will have this area being ruled. And you know about people who are commuters nowadays. So I guess that's what Peter of Aragon was doing. I mean, because I kept thinking, as great as it was to be in Aragon, you still need to check up on things in Sicily, downtown Palermo, how's it going? And so that's why we have a fleet. And so we're going back and forth, maybe long weekends. All of that. They would rule there, Peter, and then look up here. We're going to have Charles of Anjou. And his family will continue to rule that area. And you see Salerno, and you see Naples and all of that. It'll take a lot of dead people to bring about that result. Believe me, this was not something that was just settled easily or quickly. It went on really for 2 decades before you will have the two, and then you will have each being a king. And then you look on, and of course, there's our territory, St. Peter's land. And then up, you see Florence. So, in part, this helps you understand why it takes so long for Italy to be unified, right? It's only part of the story. Now, speaking about the Gospel of John the Baptist, or that writing, you remember when he talks about Pharisees being that brood of vipers? Well, let's borrow a little bit, as the Pope did when he declares the family of Frederick II, as in the 16-year-old grandson, Conradin, of the brood of vipers. Innocent IV, the Pope of Genoa, incidentally, rich merchant family from Genoa, they issued that thought of damnation. You got a Hohenstaufen ID card, you need to die because you're bound for hell. So we got a special ticket for you. The idea being that popes are now largely political. In part, this is the problem with Innocent III, but it just gets so much worse. So the idea, this is so clearly and crudely political to control this particular territory. And so it's not, we want to establish more missionaries in Palermo and want to have a soup kitchen in Naples. I think this is pretty obviously political. We want to get a king who will be a sycophant and kiss some cheeks. So the empire, now this is a little fun fact. In 1273, the first Habsburg ruler, the Great War, the end of the Habsburgs, Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that would bring back memories. But you understand, those Habsburgs are never very strong. And they first take the throne in 1273. It's a nice statue. I mean, I wish I had a statue like that. Maybe I'll pick up a collection. Not today, but you can save up to make a donation. But Rudolph of Habsburg, he just happened to be the first. He'd say, well, it's great to be an emperor. I know the title is fabulous. But how about power? Well, it's not so much. As Voltaire said, it's neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But it seems like it's great. I'm holy Roman emperor. Yeah. It's more like honorary, It's like you're really special, but you're not. You don't really do anything. So that comes out of this period because Frederick II wasn't much of an emperor. I mean, he liked the income. I mean, I should race to his bots and the checks are there, the interest checks from Hohenstaufen lands or that kind of thing. But in terms of exercising real power, you wonder sometimes why German unification was retarded. That's another reason. When you think about all of these territories were just going their own way, Bavaria, Swabia, what have you. And it's nice, like I say, with Rudolph, he's emperor. It's great to be a Habsburg, at least until what, 1918? Yeah. But yeah, but it's all honorary to me. Oh, bless his heart, as we like to say. Henry III. I'm anti-debt. I'll be honest with you. I'm really anti. I like to, be able to pay for what I buy. Henry III didn't have a problem though with credit. He was big time credit. Can you imagine the repo man coming to the palace? It was constant. I mean, it's very embarrassing. And you talk about Parliament, the nobles coming, sir. Oh, I'm sure they tried to be sort of deferential. I guess that's what they do when you're running out of money. Sir, you need to kind of pay some of these bills. I guess that's what they do before they get into the collection. Ooh, collection agency or whatever they do. That's very exciting. But anyway, what happens in this case is that Henry III loses control of his own government. And that's why we have this great statue, as many of you have seen while you've been there, of Simon de Montfort. And this 1264 to 65 takeover of the government. So there we have that very connection, because if it hadn't been for that, if Henry III had paid his bills, and that's always the problem, because this beginning parliament led by Simon de Montfort is saying your government is not a good government. And that will become very, very important. So I laid it on this Sicilian business. If you think about if he had not been involved in this, I mean, obviously, kings have lots of other projects. I mean, a Scottish project, a French project. We got lots going on. But Sicily, we love Sicily. But that probably was better if he hadn't been spending money there. It's saving. Maybe needed to save up, something that draws interest, investments. Yeah. Lots of wool. Yeah, give me sheep or give me death. Yeah, that's it. I know. He looks so nice, but not the sharpest guy. Yeah, Philip III. Look at what they say about him, 1270 to 1285. Perhaps the most unnecessary, unjust, and calamitous enterprise ever undertaken by the French monarchy. That would hurt you. You wouldn't want to, if you were a king, like, aren't we glad we don't, we're gone before the history comes out? Because that's, ratemyking.com. Yeah, that would be, yeah. What he did was, for his Uncle Charles, we love our uncles. I get that. He will send, leading this Philip III, he will send an army to Aragon I'm going to beat up on those Aragonese. You hurt my uncle. And then, and this they call a crusade. Well, how is it a crusade? Well, crusade's whatever the Pope wants it to be, clearly. So now it's a crusade because the Aragonese, who are seriously Catholic, by the way, but now the King of Aragon has rebelled against the Pope. So you're going to hell. And do not pass go, just go to hell. So there you go. That's a crusade. And believe me, I don't think the Pope said, look, let me just cover all this. I know this is going to be costly, but just like your mom and dad want to send you somewhere, we'll take care of the expenses. No, you'll take care of all of that. So this comes out of the Capetian monarchy. So Philip III was not a particularly successful. They called him Philip the Bold, I guess. Oh, you're so bold. Maybe Philip the Rash would have been better because he was not better. Their son, Philippe the Belle, Philip the Handsome, will be a lot more effective. But it's just to show you that the French were going to try to get involved. We love our uncle, Uncle Charlie. You remember that with Charles Lonchou and Louis IX. And again, you got all these trees to go over. During the break, you'll need to work on your genealogical tables, and I want to keep that going as we push on. And finally, you see what'll happen. Now, eventually, there will be a kingdom of two Sicilies, which will last until, because the immortal Garibaldi. Oh, yes. We know that 19th century, there will be a kingdom of two Sicilies, and that will eventually be, shall we say, merged into what will create Italy. But I thought this was interesting because we are at the period of the Renaissance, aren't we? And, oh, there's Florence, and you think about all the wonderful places. Oh, there's Genoa. And you think of all the places up there. But never forget, as you're looking at all these territories, the significance of Sicily and Naples, and of course, that pesky Rome, they can have their issues too. But this will be, I think it's safe to say, a significant part of what will become Italy later on. So that was a very interesting, I thought, little bit of history from Sicily, and of course, the concerns of all of these different kings and dynasties during this particular period. I thank you very much, and I will look forward to seeing some of you. I hope many of you in the next term, please. Thank you.